My wife ignored my messages all day. At 8 p.m., she finally came home and smirked. You know what happened? I had a one-night stand with my business partner, and I'd do it again. I just nodded and finished my meal in silence. The next morning when she woke up expecting coffee in bed, she got a lesson in consequences. You ever have one of those nights where the quiet in your own house feels like a physical weight, a thick blanket of dread smothering every familiar sound? That was me, Jason, sitting at my kitchen island in our Seattle apartment, pushing a cold salmon fillet around my plate. The clock on the microwave read 7:58 p.m. I'd texted my wife, Hannah, a handful of times throughout the day. Good luck with the investor meeting. Should I pick up wine for tonight? Everything okay? Nothing. Not a single read receipt. The silence was a void, and I was falling into it. At 8 p.m. on the dot, the lock on the front door clicked. It wasn't the hesitant sound of someone coming home late from work, it was a sharp, declarative sound, a key striking the tumblers with finality. Hannah walked in, her heels striking the polished concrete floor with metronomic precision. She was still in her power suit, a sharp, navy blue blazer and tailored trousers that cost more than my first car. She looked triumphant, but not in a way that included me. This was a victory she'd won alone, on a battlefield I didn't know existed. Her eyes, a cool shade of gray that could look like a calm sea or a stormy sky, scanned the room and landed on me with a detached amusement. I was part of the scenery, a prop in her story, the audience for her one-woman show. She dropped her leather tote onto a counter stool with a dismissive thud. Then came the smirk. It was a small, vicious curl of her lips that I'd never seen before, a look that was both foreign and terrifyingly familiar, as if it had been hiding beneath the surface for years. Rough day? I asked, mostly to hear the sound of my own voice in the heavy silence, to prove I was still there. You could say that, she said, her tone light, almost breezy, as if she were discussing the weather. You'll never guess what I did after we closed the Anderson account. We went to the Oracle to celebrate. The Oracle. I knew it. A dimly lit lounge, all dark wood and low-slung leather couches, where the cocktails were $18 and the conversations were whispered. I'd met her there for drinks once, months ago. She'd spent half the time on her phone, texting Mark, she'd said, about a client. The memory curdled in my stomach. I said nothing. I just watched her, my fork hovering over the salmon. I slept with Mark, she declared, leaning against the counter, crossing her arms. My business partner. In the penthouse suite the firm keeps for out-of-town clients. And you know what, Jason? I'd do it again. It was electrifying. She let the word hang in the air, a spark meant to ignite a blaze. The air in the kitchen turned to ice. You could have heard a pin drop in the apartment below. But I didn't gasp. I didn't stand up. I simply placed another piece of salmon in my mouth and chewed slowly. The fish was tasteless, a texture in my mouth, nothing more. In that moment, I felt something inside me detach, like a ship deliberately cutting its own mooring lines, setting itself adrift from a doomed shore. I looked at her, at the woman I'd shared a bed with for 6 years, and I gave a single, calm nod. It was the most powerful thing I could have done. She blinked, her smug expression faltering for a fraction of a second. She had been braced for an explosion, for tears, for a performance worthy of her confession. My silence was a void her theatrics couldn't fill. My calm was a wall her words couldn't scale. That's it? She asked, an edge of disappointment, almost offense, in her voice. You're not going to say anything? You're not going to ask for details? I swallowed, took a slow, deliberate sip of water, and looked her dead in the eye. Congratulations. The word hung in the air, simple and devastating. Her confidence seemed to deflate, the arrogant posture slumping slightly. She had handed me a live grenade and I had simply placed it back in her hands. You're not even going to fight for me, she whispered, her voice suddenly small and lost. Fight for what, Hannah? I replied, my voice eerily level, the voice I used in boardrooms to deliver bad news. You're not telling me you joined a gym. You're telling me you set our marriage on fire for a thrill. There's nothing left here to fight for. The battlefield is ashes. That landed like a physical blow. She stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, the gray in her eyes churning like a real storm now. Without another word, as if my logic had physically pushed her back, she snatched her purse and stormed down the hall to our bedroom, slamming the door so hard a framed print of the Seattle skyline rattled on the wall. I didn't move. I sat there in the ensuing silence, which was now a different kind of quiet, not heavy with dread, but charged with a strange, cold clarity. The pain was there, a dull, throbbing ache in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a razor-sharp focus, a survival instinct I didn't know I possessed. In my mind, I opened a new, pristine mental spreadsheet. I titled it Operation Phoenix. The name came to me instantly, a promise of rebirth from the flames she had so carelessly ignited. Column A, Marital Assets. Sub-columns, House, Accounts, Investments. Column B, Digital Fortress. Sub-columns, Passwords, Cloud Storage, Social Media. Column C, Exit Strategy. Sub-columns, Lawyer, Temporary Housing, Emotional Detachment. I would dismantle this life with the same meticulous planning I used to build it. Brick by brick, bite by bite. An hour later, she emerged, face washed free of its war paint, wearing one of my old university sweatshirts, a classic move in the playbook of marital manipulation, designed to evoke nostalgia and soften hearts. "You don't even care," she said, her voice thick with performative hurt, leaning against the doorframe as if she might collapse from the burden of my indifference. "Care is a finite resource," I said, not looking up from the dishwasher I was loading. I placed each plate, each fork, with deliberate care. I'm allocating mine more wisely now. To things that offer a return on investment. "You're a robot," she snapped, the hurt instantly replaced by fury at my continued refusal to play my part. "Funny," I said, closing the dishwasher with a soft, definitive click. "I was just thinking the same thing about your conscience. It seems to be missing its ethical programming." She let out a frustrated, guttural groan and retreated back to the bedroom. This time, the door slam was weaker, less sure, the sound of a tantrum losing its steam. I actually smiled. It was a thin, cold smile, but it was real. It was the smile of a man who had just found the solid floor of the abyss and realized he could build a new foundation right there. I poured a generous glass of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the light, and flipped on the television, muting the sound. I found a documentary on deep-sea exploration. The screen was filled with impossible, alien creatures that thrived under immense pressure, in absolute darkness. The narrator's silent words scrolled across the bottom of the screen. I raised my glass to the bizarre, resilient lifeforms. "I hear you," I muttered to the room. "I hear you." Around midnight, I heard them. The muffled, hiccuping sobs through the door. The sound of self-pity trying to masquerade as remorse. A year ago, even 6 months ago, I would have rushed in. I would have been the hero in her drama, soothing the very pain she had caused. Absorbing her guilt to make myself feel needed. Not tonight. That man was gone. He had been dismantled with a smirk at 8 p.m. I let her cry. I let the sound wash over me, and I felt nothing but a distant, clinical pity. This wasn't pain for the marriage, this was pain for being caught, for the consequences being so unnervingly calm. I went to my home office, a sanctuary of oak and order, and powered up my laptop. The soft glow of the screen illuminated my face in the dark room. I made Operation Phoenix a reality. The first tab was finances. I started with the joint bank accounts, moving methodically. I changed the security questions to things she could never guess. Mother's maiden name. Karma. City you were born in. Consequences. Name of your first pet. Betrayal. I set up transaction alerts for any amount over $50. I was no longer a partner, I was an auditor. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the apartment, bold and unforgiving, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny specks of my shattered past. I was already up, dressed in clean, casual clothes, and drinking coffee that I had brewed just for me from beans she found too bitter. The rich, dark aroma was my scent now. I heard the bedroom door creak open with a tentative whine. Hannah emerged, squinting, her blonde hair a tangled mess. She looked small and crumpled in the harsh morning light. "Jason," she croaked, her voice raspy. "Can you make me a green juice?" My head is killing me. It was less a request and more a habit, an expectation built over 1,000 mornings. I turned from the window, holding my mug, the city sprawling behind me. "Good morning," I said, my voice pleasant, neutral, the way you'd address a colleague you barely know. "The juicer is in the cupboard. The kale is in the fridge. I believe in your ability to operate them both." She stared at me, baffled, her brain struggling to process this deviation from the script. "What is wrong with you?" she finally managed, her voice rising. "Are you really still that mad about last night? I was drunk and stressed, and you've been so distant." "Mad?" I tilted my head, as if considering the word for the first time. "No, Hannah, I'm not mad. Mad is a temporary emotion, a flash in the pan. This is a permanent state of understanding. You showed me who you are. I believe you. It's that simple." She opened her mouth to retort, to drag me back into the circular argument she was so good at, but I cut her off, my voice still calm but leaving no room for debate. "You felt neglected, so your solution was to have an affair with your business partner. That's not a cry for help. That's a nuclear option. You don't get to detonate the bomb and then complain about the fallout. You don't get to shatter the vase and then ask why the floor is wet." Her face flushed with genuine anger now, the vulnerability gone. "My projects," I continued, answering the accusation she hadn't yet made, "pay for this apartment, your wardrobe, your personal trainer, and that $400 juicer you're glaring at. Loyalty isn't something you revoke when you feel a little bored or underappreciated. It's the foundation. You torched it." She stormed past me to the kitchen, yanking the juicer from the cupboard with enough force to rattle the glasses inside. I watched her fumble with kale and ginger and celery, her movements jerky and uncoordinated with rage. It was the most physical effort I'd seen her put into anything in months. Later, as she was getting ready for work, her phone buzzed incessantly on the counter, dancing with each new notification. She rushed out of the bedroom, grabbing her keys and snatching the phone without looking at me. "We'll talk about this tonight," she said, a command, not a request, the familiar steel back in her voice. "I have plans," I replied smoothly, not elaborating. She left, and the silence that settled in her wake was different from the night before. It wasn't empty or heavy, it was full of potential. It was my silence now. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was free. I spent the day executing my plan with the focus of a surgeon. I called a lawyer, a formidable woman named Mrs. Eleanor Vance, whose website tagline was "Equitable divorce is my specialty." Equitable is defined by me. I liked her immediately. I emailed her my preliminary Operation Phoenix spreadsheet. She called me back within the hour. "Mr. Evans," she said, her voice like polished granite. "This is the most beautifully organized pre-divorce filing I have ever seen. The color coding alone is a thing of beauty. We are going to have a very productive relationship." I spent the afternoon methodically cutting the digital strings. I canceled her authorized user credit cards. I changed the passwords to every streaming service, every shared utility account, even the grocery delivery app. I didn't do it out of petty spite, though the feeling was there, a faint, satisfying hum. I did it as a boundary. She had chosen to leave the partnership, she no longer got the perks. It was basic corporate logic applied to a failed merger. That evening, I went to the art gallery opening I'd told her I was attending. It was a new exhibit by an artist I'd quietly supported for years, a good friend named Leo. I needed to be seen, to be normal, to exist outside the crumbling walls of my marriage. I needed to prove to myself that my life had a context that did not include Hannah. The gallery was all white walls and polished concrete, humming with the low, sophisticated murmur of the cultural crowd. I took a glass of wine from a passing tray and tried to lose myself in the bold, abstract paintings, in the swirls of color that represented someone else's chaos. And that's when I saw them. Across the room, standing near a dramatic, 7-foot-tall canvas slashed with red and black, was Hannah. And next to her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back, was Mark. He was exactly as I'd pictured him, expensively groomed, with a confident, almost arrogant slump to his shoulders, his salt and pepper hair a little too perfectly styled. They were laughing, their heads close together, too close, too familiar for colleagues. She was wearing the emerald necklace I'd bought her for our last anniversary, a jewel that now felt like a trophy she'd won from me. It was one thing to hear the confession in the stark, private theater of my kitchen. It was another thing entirely to see the betrayal living and breathing in public, smiling and sipping Chardonnay, smirking at me from across a crowded room. A hot, acidic wave of nausea washed over me, and for a second, the room swam. But I locked my knees, clenched the stem of my wine glass, and stood my ground. I would not faint. I would not run. Leo appeared at my side, his cheerful expression fading as he followed my gaze. "Jason? You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I said, my voice tight, the calm I'd cultivated threatening to crack. "I've seen the truth without its makeup on. That's her. That's the business partner." Leo's face darkened. "Want me to have them thrown out? I can make a scene." I almost said yes. The temptation to unleash a public hurricane, to watch their smug faces crumple in humiliation, was a sweet, burning poison in my veins. But I shook my head. I didn't need to cause a scene. I needed evidence. I needed power. "No," I said, my voice steadying. "Just, give me a minute." I didn't look away. I let the image burn itself into my retina, her animated face, his proprietary hand, the emerald glittering under the gallery lights. I simply took out my phone, and in the dim, sophisticated light, I opened the camera. The flash was off. But the gallery's track lighting was perfect. I zoomed in. I took a crystal-clear photo. Then another. And a short, 10-second video of him leaning in to whisper in her ear, her subsequent laugh, a little too loud, a little too performative. It was all so damning. I turned and walked out, the buzz of the crowd fading behind me into a meaningless hum. On the sidewalk, the cool night air hit my face like a slap, shocking me back into my body. I took a deep, shuddering breath, then another, filling my lungs with air that wasn't tainted by their presence. Then, I opened my phone and created a new folder. I labeled it Exhibit A. I attached the photo and the video and emailed them directly to Mrs. Vance. The subject line was, "Further context." The body of the email contained a single sentence: "I believe this qualifies as irreconcilable differences and provides insight into the nature of the relationship." As I walked away from the gallery, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Not an email. A text. I pulled it out. "Hannah. Hannah, I saw you. That was a pathetic stunt. You followed me. Are you that desperate?" I stopped walking, right there on the sidewalk, people flowing around me like I was a stone in a river. A slow, cold smile spread across my face, the first genuine smile of the evening. She thought this was about her. She thought my presence was a desperate, pathetic attempt to watch her, to plead with her. She was still the star of her own movie, and I was just a persistent extra. She didn't understand that I was there for me. That my life, Operation Phoenix, was now the main feature. I typed back my reply, my thumb striking the screen with a sense of finality that felt better than any shout, any slammed door. I didn't follow you, Hannah. But it seems my lawyer will be. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need to see the typing bubbles appear and disappear. I went into her contact info, scrolled to the bottom, and selected, block this caller. The finality of the action, so simple, so digital, was more liberating than any dramatic speech. A quiet, decisive click, and one of the loudest noises in my life was silenced. Operation Phoenix was underway, and as I walked home through the gleaming, rain-slick streets of Seattle, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that from the ashes of my old life, I was already rising. Subscribe Karma Twin Voices for more.